So,
Like that, okay.
firstly, by reminding everyone that the shiur is Le'ilu Nishpat Avi Mori Dover Meir Ben Ruven Halevi and Imi Marati Rachel Bat Harav Michael. And tonight, as to be expected, we will be discussing parshat Vayayshev. And I'm going to share my screen because we're going to really do. I put together an analysis of. All right. I'm now. Can everybody see my screen now, or not?
Yes.
That's the question.
Yes.
You should all see a. Hold on. I'm trying to see. Make sure I've got everything covered here. Okay, so you should be seeing on front of you the parsha of Vayayshev with all kinds of different colors on it. This is something I prepared so we can perhaps go through. We're going to talk about the story of Yosef or the sale of Yosef, and really the I think the point I'm going to make. I'm going to give away the punchline of the story to begin with by telling you that when people ask, are things predetermined or do we have free choice? People sometimes go one way, sometimes go the other way. And I think the answer is a little of both. And I think tonight's year, I'm going to try to uh, postulate and show that in the story of Yosef, that there are certain events that are controlled by us, and there are other events that are seemingly beyond our ability to control in our own lives. And we're going to speak about that specifically from the perspective of Yosef uh, as this chapter plays out. So the parsha, now, if just to give you the color coding that I've chosen, green is something referring to Yaakov or Yisrael, who, if we remember correctly, are the same, one and the same. Yellow, particularly, is Yosef. Light blue is going to be the brothers. And later on, we're going to see gray and we're going to see purple and red. So we'll explain those as we get into those, because those did my screen shot, is my screenshot still there?
No,
Yes. Yes.
Okay, I can't tell anymore. My computer is doing very strange things, so I have no idea what you're seeing or what I'm seeing. Are you seeing my computer screen now? Am I screen
no,
sharing? Let's go back to share screen again and try again. Share. Okay, now can you see my screen again?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
fine.
Yes.
Okay, good. Okay, so let's try to go forward. So the parsha begins very simply by talking about Yaakov, who has finally returned home after his stay in love with Lavan, his travails on the way home with Esav, with what happened in Shechem, and all the other things that we read about last week. And now he is living Be'eretz Meguri Aviv in the land of Canaan. And then the parsha introduces Eila Toldot Yaakov. These are the generations of Yaakov. Interestingly enough, this is very reminiscent of a phrase we've seen a number of times in Bereshit, starting with Eila Toldot Hashemayim V'Aretz, Eila Toldot Noach, Eila Toldot Yitzchak ben Avraham. In each of these cases, we have had almost a new beginning, a new chapter, a new, not just chapter, but a new epic in the history of creation. And, and particularly as here it relates to,
I'll be finished before 9 o'clock.
it particularly as it relates to Yaakov here and his generations, who are now going to be the basis of Am Yisrael. So interestingly enough, the parasha begins with Eila Toldot Yaakov Yosef. It begins by telling us about Yosef, and as we know fairly well, that throughout the rest of the parasha of, the Sefer of Bereshit, as well as if we really look at Jewish history throughout, we find that the history of the Jewish people is going to revolve around Yosef and Yehuda as the two almost wings of the Jewish people, the two different sections of the Jewish people. And we begin with Yosef, and because he is going to be the focal point of most of the rest of Sefer Bereshit. And his story becomes the story of Am Yisrael arriving in Egypt. So the pasuk tells us about Yosef, and it says, "Vayave Yosef et dibatam ra'a el avihem," that Yosef brings reports to his father about things he sees with his brothers. So the first question that I wanted to address a little bit in the parasha is, why does Yosef feel the need to report this behavior to his brothers? And interestingly enough, as with everything, we have numerous different answers given by the Mefarshim. Among them being that Yosef was hoping that their father would help him out in correcting the behavior of his son, of the other sons. Yosef knew that because he is the youngest, the brothers would not heed him. He felt that him giving them musar about what he perceived to be their inappropriate behavior would not be effective. He hoped that Yaakov's perhaps musar would be a little bit more effective. That's one side of the equation where we viewing Yosef in a very positive light. The other side of the coin is that Yosef, at this point in his life, had not yet reached the maturity level that he will reach later. And as such, he is doing a number of things that appear to be very childish. And we're going to see that same theme a few psukim down when we get to discussing dreams and Yosef's sharing of that dreams with the brothers. But again, the same theme is going to run through a lot of this parak in terms of where was Yosef at this point in his life, in terms of maturity level, in terms of wisdom, in terms of perhaps what we might call street smarts, in terms of interacting with his brothers and with within the family. Pasuk Gimel, again, it's not Yosef acting here; it's Yisrael. Ahavet Yosef mikol banav kiven zikunim hulo v'asalo ketonet pasim. Yisrael, not Yaakov. Interestingly enough, we started with Yaakov living in Eretz Canaan, and they told us of Yaakov. And here suddenly it switches to Yisrael, Ahavet Yosef mikol banav. Not calling him Yaakov here, calling him Yisrael. And if we go through the Mefarshim want to tell us that in general, when we have once Yaakov's name has been changed to Yisrael, it seems as though that Yaakov is used more for the secular Yaakov, the Yaakov man of the world, and Yisrael is used more for Yaakov, the man of the spirit. And so the fact that it says Yisrael Ahavet Yosef leads one of the Mefarshim, i.e. Rashi, who quotes a midrash.
There you go.
Okay, I'm back. I apologize. I don't know where I went, but my internet, as I said, is jumping up and down and sideways. So let's try to share the screen again. See if we can get this back.
Kobe, do you have some other internet working at the same time?
What?
Do you have some other internet also in the house at the same time?
We have two different things, but I don't know. As I said, my internet is just it's
Well,
I don't know.
that's what I find when I'm teaching. If there are
If
other
someone, you're
computers
saying
on
if
the
someone
internet,
else is using the internet, it
picks up the bandwidth. Yeah,
there's
there's only a limited amount of bandwidth or something.
I
found it.
I don't know. I mean, I've been doing this now for I don't know how many weeks. This is the first time I've had any problem with the with it. Whatever it is. Okay. Anyway, moving back.
I have it a lot.
All right. Moving back to where we are.
You want to try to reboot your router?
Hang on a second. Give me 1 minute, please. I gotta get. What am I doing here? Hold on a second. Okay. All right. So we are okay. We were up to Yisrael Havet Yosef Mikol Banav Kiven Zekunim Hulo. Now the Torah tells us interestingly that Yisrael loved Yosef. And again, Rashi brings down one of the opinions that ben zikunim means zikna, meaning zekana chachma, it's a common rabbinic use of the word zikna, that Yosef as was the Talmid Chacham per se of the sons, and that therefore it's Yisrael, not Yaakov, that loves him. That's one of the opinions brought down by Rashi, that's the meaning of Ben Zikunim. Now the other Rashi also brings down another interpretation of Ben Zikunim. Zikunim simply old age. That he was Rashi says Shenoah Lobi ate Ziknato, that he was the one who was born when Yaakov was at a ripe old age. However, other of the Mepharshim have a problem with those interpretations of Rashi. And the different commentaries try to explain and try to reconcile this concept of ven zikunim, what that means and why Yaakov loved Yosef. Rashbam says that pretty much building on Rashi's commentary that he was born at an older age, says that says Ben Zekunim, the reason Yosef is the favorite is he is the youngest of the 11 that are all born sort of ratzuf, sort of successively, whereas Binyamin, there's a 6 to 8 year gap between the birth of all of the others who were born within a 6-year period, and Binyamin, who was the youngest. Rashbam wants to say that Binyamin, since there was such a big gap, that already by the time Binyamin was born, Yosef had already been established as the favorite, as the young favorite, and therefore he keeps that status even after Binyamin is born. Interestingly enough, though, Chizkuni gives a very different interpretation why Yosef rather than Binyamin, and we understand, why we seem to think that that these two should be the favorite anyway, because they are the two of his favorite wife Rachel. But Chizkuni says, why not Binyamin? And he says, Ein avat Binyamin kishur.
Your boss is attempting to reach you on your
And the
cellular
reason
device.
why Yaakov does not have the same kesher with Binyamin that he has with Yosef is very simply because he associates Binyamin with the death of Rachel, with the death of his favorite wife. And as such, he is more attached to Yosef because he remembers Yosef and Rachel being alive rather than Binyamin, who he associates with the death of Rachel. And as such, he can't develop, I guess, the same connection to Binyamin that he establishes with Yosef until later, because we see that later on when Yosef is gone and Yaakov has no idea what happens, he thinks he's dead, then he does get attached to Binyamin as the only remnant he has, or the only remaining memory he has of his beloved wife Rachel. Okay, having said that, I'm going to go now to Ramban's commentary, because Ramban gives a completely different, after he quotes Rashi and he quotes Ibn Ezra, and gives their reasons for the fact that he was older and etc. He says, I really don't think that's what Ben Zekunim means. And ultimately, he explains that Ben Zekunim, at least from Ramban's perspective, says Ben Zekunim is he was the son who is appointed by the father to be in charge of or be responsible for him in his old age. And as such, that's the concept of Ben Zekunim. And that's why Yaakov is so attached to him, because he is always with Yaakov. He's Yaakov's attendant as the child who will be responsible, or who bears responsibility for being his valet, whatever you want to call it. That's why Yaakov is so attached to Yosef. Okay, so whichever, and of course, and then he goes on and quotes the Onkelos, who says that the reason Yaakov loves Yosef is because of his intellect, and that is why Yaakov, it seems, shares, at least according to Midrash, shares a lot of his learning that he does not necessarily share with all of the children, specifically with Yosef, because Yosef could grasp it better than any of the others, and that seems to be Onkelus's perspective, again from the Midrash. Um, so we see again in Pasuk Beit, if we look back to Bet and Gimel, we see that again, Yosef has a different relationship, A, with his fathers and B, with his brothers, because of one, something he's doing. If we look at verse Bet, he is the one who is relating what they're doing to their father. But also in verse 3, we find that something that is done to Yosef. In other words, he gets this special gift from his father, this ketonet pasim, and that also contributes. So again, as I said, it's not everything is in his part of this is driven by his actions, but part is driven by somebody else's actions. Pasuk Daled talks about the brothers and their relationship with Yosef. It says, "Vayiru achav ki oto ahav avihem mikol echav vayisneu oto." The brothers, the pasuk uses the word hated him. V'lo yachlu dabro l'shalom. Interestingly enough, if you'll notice in the blue in pasuk Daled, Hey, and Chet, we have 3 times this concept of their hatred for him. Vayisnu oto, vayosifu od lisno oto, and again vayosifu od lisno oto. So 3 times it describes that the brothers really did not like Yosef. Again, and it's interesting because if we go through the 3 stages, we're going to find that different things happen to to cause the Torah to say Vayosifu. In other words, they added additional fire to the already fuel to the existing fire of their feelings for Yosef. So what are they? And here again, we look at pasuk Hey, which tells us Vayachalom Yosef Chalom Vayaged le'achav. Yosef had a dream and he told his brothers Vayosifu otzno oto, and they hated him even more. There's a machloket among the parshim whether pasuk Hey is connected to pasuk Vav or is separate from pasuk Vav. Because if we look at pasuk Hey, Hey says that Yosef has a dream and he tells his brothers. And then in pasuk Vav it starts by Yomer Aleichem, he says to them. So the question the Mefarshim say is the chalom that he refers to in verse 6. Shimona chalom hazeh asher chalamti. Listen to this dream I dreamt. Is that the same as the dream that was referred to in verse 5 or not? Verse Hey or not? And it's basically split in 2. Now I got to remember who says which. So give me 1 second. Chizkuni and those who follow Chizkuni say that the chalom in verse 5 is not the same as the chalom in verse 6, and that's why the Torah says Vayosifu od sno oto. He had a dream. He told his brothers the dream. The Torah does not record this dream. And Chizkuni says the reason it's not recorded is because lo nitkayim, it was not fulfilled. Therefore, it was not recorded in the Torah. So this was, I guess, what we might say an ordinary dream, but it was a dream that caused the brothers to hate him more. And that's why it says Vayosifu ots no oto. Then in verses 6 and 7, we have Joseph tells them about a dream which we're familiar with, where they're all in the field, they're binding their bundles of sheaves, and his sheaf gets up and they all bow down, all their sheaves bow down to his sheaf. And again, at the end, after the brothers question what that dream means by saying Hamolo Timlo Cholenu in Pasuk Chet, again, it adds Vayosifu Otsno Oto. So according to Chizkuni, the reason why Vayosifu Otsno Oto is written both in Pasuk Hey and in Pasuk Chet is because there are 2 different dreams, and that's why it says in Pasuk Chet al chalomotav, because of his dreams. So he's already related 2 dreams to them at least. The one in verse Hey, the one in verse Vav. That's Chizkuni's interpretation. The others, led basically by Rashi, say no, that the chalom in verse 6 is the same as the chalom in verse 5. And the pasuk where it says al chalomotav al devarav is because of that obviously there are other dreams that are not recorded in the parsha, or it's referring to pasuk tet, a later dream that he's going to have, but it's not referring to 2 different dreams in Hey and Vav. And the reason it interrupts to say Vayosifu od sno oto in pasuk Hey, which seems out of place if Hey, Vav, and Zion are the same dream. The reason the Torah interrupts is to tell us that even though he told his brothers that he had a dream, he was hoping they would ask him to relate the dream, and they didn't. And because of their hatred for him, and that's why the Torah interjects that hatred before he tells them and goes and tells them about the dream. Okay, so the next question we have to really try to understand a little bit is, if Yosef is the wisest of Yaakov's sons, according to one opinion, why does he relate the dreams to the brothers? And again, two different schools of thought among the Parshanim. One, specifically articulated by Sforno, is that he is relating the dreams because he is not yet mature enough to realize that there's a potential danger in relating these dreams to his brothers. So that's one school of thought that goes that way. The others, however, want to tell us that the reason he relates this dream is primarily because it is prophetic in nature, and as a prophet, he knows that there is an obligation to share the prophecy with the people to whom it is intended. And we see that, I guess, a bit more clearly when we look at his second dream, because his second dream, not only does he tell it to his brothers, but he tells it in Pasuk Yud, Vayisaper Laviv V'Elachav. He tells it both to his brothers and his father. Why doesn't he tell the first dream to his father? Because in the first dream, his father does not seem to be represented. The brothers are out in the field, they're binding sheaves, so it relates to the brothers specifically. That's why he shares it with them. Whereas in the second one, where there are 11 stars plus the Shemesh and the Areach, and according to one interpretation of the dream, the Shemesh and the Areach refer to Yaakov and Bilhah, who is the only one who's alive when they get to Mitzrayim, since Rachel and Leah have already died. But the fact is that since his father is part of the dream, he now, or at least in one perspective, he now relates it to his father also. So that's the Rush says that very clearly, that he was clearly ready to take whatever feedback would result from the brothers, but because he knew he had to share this with them because it was prophetic in nature. He could tell somehow, again, I guess if you're a Navi, you know when you're getting a Nevuah. Obviously, Yosef felt that this was not just a dream, this was a Nevuah. And as such, he felt he had to share it with the brothers. And that's, as I said, primarily the Rush. And also, if I'm not mistaken, Orach Chaim and Rashi. There were a number of Perushim who tell us that because Yosef has this perspective that these are prophetic, he has to share it with the brothers. We move forward into the parsha, and we know what happens, that the brothers are Vayikanu, ultimately after Vayosifod and Pasuk Yud Aleph, after all the dreams, it says Vayikanu Boachav. The brothers are now jealous of him, because now if they realize that this is a prophetic dream, they obviously feel that somehow he is going to be the leader over them, and perhaps they're jealous of that. Or it could be going back on the original, that the fact that their father loved him more, that's why they were jealous of him. Now we know the story plays out how it plays out. The brothers go to Shechem, and again, I wanted now to focus on the other half of the story, which basically is how Yosef gets sold. But if we look at the color screen that I've tried to put out, firstly, Yosef is sent by his father to Shechem. He says, Hineni, I'm ready to go. Yaakov says, please go find everybody. And he gets to Shechem. If you look in Pasuk Yudal, it says, Vayavo Shechema. And Yosef arrives in Shechem. And suddenly now the story takes a very, very strange twist. Vayimtza'ehu ish. Now that's why the gray is here. Somewhere in the middle of this story, now we've talked about brothers, we've talked about Yaakov, we've talked about Yosef, and suddenly this ish, this mystery man, suddenly shows up in the middle of the story. Yosef is lost. He's in the field. He's lost. He can't find anything. The person engages him in conversation, not just somebody who he finds him. He sees he's lost, and he engages him in conversation and says, what are you looking for? And Yosef answers him as a Chai Anochi Vakesh, and he doesn't just say what he's looking for. He says, Hagidan Ali Efohim Roim, please tell me where they are. Now, it seems very strange that Yosef would run into a quote random stranger and expect him A, to recognize who his brothers are, B, to know where they are, and C, to even engage him. I mean, think about it. You're lost on the way and you run into a total random stranger. Would you engage him in conversation? I don't know. Maybe back then you would. I don't know. But again, it seems like a very, very strange twist to the story, especially when we look at Rashi and the Midrash that says, who is this Ish? None other than the Malach Gavriel. And of course, since he is the Malach, if according to the Midrash is right, he's the Malach Gavriel, then clearly we understand Pasuk Yud Zayin. Vayomar Ish Nasu Mizeki Shamat Yomim Nelchodo Toina. That's why he would have known what the brothers had said, and they said they were going to go somewhere else. But ultimately, if we look at the end of Yud Zayin, it's Yosef who decides what to do with this information. He could have taken the information, said, okay, that's very nice. I told my father I'd come to Shechem, look for them. I did that. I finished my job. I'm going back home. I can tell Dad, sorry, I didn't find him. Okay? That was his choice. His choice is Vayelach Yosef Acharachav Vayimtzaim Bedotan. He goes beyond because he wants to try to answer his father. He wants to get the information that his father was looking for. And to do that, he goes above and beyond his original mission that his father tasked him with. Now, again, the rest of the story, you'll notice lots of blue. The brothers see him coming. They're not sure what to do with him. First they want to kill him. Then they throw him into a pit. Then and ultimately he gets there. They do throw him into the pit. And finally, Judah says, why should we kill him? Let's sell him to this Ishmaelite caravan that's shown up. Pasuk Chavchet, you'll notice, is a different color. Okay, again, a seemingly completely different set of characters suddenly show up on the scene out of literally nowhere and change the whole story. Okay, remember, verse 27, they're thinking about selling him to these Ishmaelites who they've seen coming in the distance. And suddenly in verse Chavchet, Vayavru Anashim Midyanim Socharim, a group of Midianite traders come through. Vayimshechu Vayalu et Yosef bin Habar, and they drew down ropes and picked Yosef out of the pit. Vayimkru et Yosef LaYishmaelim bi'esrim kesef, and they, we don't know who the they is, sold Yosef to the Ishmaelim for 20 pieces of silver. Vayaviu et Yosef Mitzrayim, and they brought Yosef to Mitzrayim. Okay, we got a lot of theys in this pasuk. Okay, and this is the problem and trying to understand this pasuk. So we know that there are anashim midyanim socharim who show up. They pass by, and then it says, and they lowered ropes and raised Yosef from the pit. Now, the previous verse 27 clearly is talking about the brothers. Yehuda is talking to the brothers. Are they the ones who lowered the ropes and raised Yosef from the pit? Or was it the Anashim Midyanim Socharim? Because generally we know when the Torah uses a pronoun, it's generally the most clearly understood antecedent of the pronoun. So here, when the pasuk says that X did so-and-so and did this and did this and did this, we could simply say that it was the Anashim Midyanim. And that's what some of the Mefarshim say, that even though the brothers intended to sell Yosef to the Ishmaelim when the Ishmaelim showed up, they were beaten to the punch by these Anashim Midyanim Socharim who passed by this pit, heard Yosef, pulled him out, and sold him. That's one interpretation. Obviously, that's not the interpretation that everybody takes. The other interpretation is clearly that it was the brothers who raised Yosef from the pit and sold him, and each has its proofs from the following psukim. Ultimately, we go back to the brothers and what they do in the aftermath. And I'm gonna, because I'm running late, I'm gonna stop here and go back to try to just wrap up a little bit here in this the points that I hope I made well in tonight's shiur. Clearly, if we look at the story in its flow, we find two key points where neither or none of the players, neither the brothers, not Yosef, not Yaakov, really are in control of the situation. Clearly, they're getting a little bit of help from an unknown source. Clearly, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, as the Midrash wants to tell us, is orchestrating all of these events. And yet, at the same time, we clearly have to understand that the players, all of the players in this story, each have their own free choice and free will. If we go through Yosef, Yosef has the opportunity to say to his father, you know what, Dad? I don't think this is a good idea for me to go out to the brothers. I have this premonition, something bad's going to happen. I don't think it's a good idea. He could have turned around when he got there and said, you know, I got to Shem. I looked for them. Okay, that's what Dad wanted me to do. I'm finished. Going home. He could have ignored this person who came and and basically prodded him into, you know, by asking him, what are you looking for? He could have just said, you know what, doesn't matter what I'm looking for. Nice to meet you, goodbye. Each of these points, Yosef has the choice to turn around and say, you know what, I'm finished. But he doesn't. He goes through with this whole, he goes through to try to find his brothers to fulfill his father's wishes. The brothers clearly, despite their feelings for Yosef, have to realize he's their brother. And they don't. They have this opportunity. They have this debate. The brothers are actively debating what they should do about Yosef. Nobody suggests, oh, you know, why should we do anything? Why don't we just say hello, how you doing, and go home? Here's how we're doing. But they, again, the plot to try to dispose of Yosef, despite all of their intention to get Yosef out of the scene and away from it, out of their lives, we find out, of course, as we go into next week's parsha of Miketz, doesn't work. We get to Miketz, we get to Vayigash, we're going to find that their attempt to remove Yosef is a failure. So clearly, despite all of their desires and all of their drive to do that, they're not successful in that, clearly because there's a higher force acting here. So even though we have to act, we don't always get what we think we're going to get. And I think that's, again, clearly part of the interplay of this story, in addition to all of the other lessons that we've got, is that lesson that even though we have free choice, even as we have free choice, we don't always have free choice. And that free choice, we do, I say it back, we always do have free choice, but that free choice isn't always going to get us where we think it's going to get us. And that's because there are always these, and I specifically made them gray, there are these gray areas where HaKadosh Baruch Hu is pulling the strings to behind the scenes to make sure that we get to where HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants us to have an opportunity to get to. And it's sometimes those opportunities which we may not want to take, which HaKadosh Baruch Hu sort of steers us to, because he knows that we need them for ourselves to grow. And clearly, Yosef, as he goes through all of his trials and tribulations, after what happens in this week's parasha, or as we go through this week's parasha and next parasha, clearly has to grow as a person, grow in his maturity. And it's through those challenges that HaKadosh Baruch Hu sends us that we often grow and become successful in life. So I hope that some of this made sense. I hope I didn't leave too many stones unturned and questions unanswered. I, at this point, will say, throw out the, open the floor for questions, comments, and feedback. Any comments, questions, feedback before we call it a night? Anybody? Okay, I guess everybody's okay then. I will wish everybody a